Hey, good evening and welcome to the PAC's latest podcast on December the 17th, 2020. I'm Tristan, here with my co-hosts Nick and Lawrence, and we're welcoming our good friend Alex Kahney back to the show. He was on, I believe, very early on this year, speaking about the current and still current topic of coronavirus, but now we've brought him on board to talk about addiction, alcoholism, and the general culture around such things, with a brief introduction, which he's written to talk about all these things. So, welcome, Alex. And,
welcome, Alex.
How are you doing?
Welcome, Alex.
Hi, guys. Oh, hello. Hi. I thought to stimulate the discussion, I would write a brief introduction, which I've done, and I'm going to read it out.
Sure.
Cheers, everyone.
It's all right. Yeah.
And here it is.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you see me?
Yep.
This is called Alcohol, our favourite Yuletide pastime. It's Christmas, and for my Christmas drink this year, I'll be quaffing a Heineken low-alcohol beer.
Oi.
This got me thinking about the nation's favourite Yuletide pastime, getting drunk. Last Christmas, I was in this kitchen on my own. My wife, Natasha, was in California, pending approval of her marriage visa. Without it, she wouldn't be able to return to the UK. Our marriage would be over, our home, everything. So we waited to hear the outcome. That Christmas period, every night, I drank myself to oblivion. Like every other night, all last year, and every year before that. Why? Fear, worry. Then I realized that my fears and worries were not going to go away if I just drank to forget them. They were still there. Not faced, not resolved. I was still there. Only my surroundings were melted into a warm sensation. I knew I had to give up. I preferred to face my fears. Until that day, I'd been unable to do anything in any evening except get drunk. I'd wasted every evening of my life since teenage. Last Christmas, in the new year, I gave up alcohol. I preferred to face my fears and found they were trivial, more worries than real fears. And most of my worries weren't even that. They were imaginary. Alcohol fed them and made them what they were. Tonight, I would like to talk about our favourite Yuletide pastime, which for very many people, the majority even, is an all-year-round pastime. Why is that? Why is drinking encouraged when nearly every other narcotic or psychedelic or pleasurable intoxication is banned? Why is the one drug that makes us worried and angry allowed?
I like it.
That's really
very cool.
Very much. That's a fact.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
And a very positive message for giving up alcohol.
That's booze for thought.
Obviously, the Laurie Wright done the same thing, and that's what all his campaign is on. He's probably been keeping.
Okay.
But it's very similar.
Let's get down to boozeness.
Very pertinent topic.
So, Alex, we could answer your question with the question. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, good point.
Why do I think alcohol is permitted in society and not in any
As
other
opposed
drug?
to other drugs, yeah.
I will quickly say the caffeine as well, but just as an aside, there are other drugs. But it's interesting how these are all very dangerous drugs, like you're saying. Caffeine is also quite dangerous.
Yeah, caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol are allowed.
Sugar as well.
Okay, I would say caffeine and nicotine are stimulants. They might pick you up or whatever. They don't really alter your mood, I don't think. Do they? Maybe they do.
I think so, no.
Not like
I see what you
alcohol.
mean. It's more about stimulation, but I guess the withdrawals could affect your mood.
Okay, well, not like alcohol. Alcohol makes you very introspective. I used to listen to music. I'd have the earphones on, and I'd be listening to music, and I'd start crying, and I never really was a problem drinker. I don't think I never got into any big troubles about it. But I used to drink a ton. I would be drunk every night, really drunk. I'd fall asleep drunk.
We used to, mate. Yeah. A long time. Yeah.
It was a way of I think it was just a way of hiding. It was a refuge. It was a sanctity where you could just get away from the things that probably weren't even that bad, but it was just a comfort to get away. And then it occurred to me that if everyone's doing this, is everyone doing it for the same reason? Is everyone so unhappy or dissatisfied, or does everyone need to escape from facing reality? I'm not accusing people of that. I'm wondering if that's the case. It was the case with me, and I then realised that I used to drink to either to make friends or to to meet people or to relax with people. That was all part of the same thing. It was fear of self-doubt or whatever it was. It was just a way of hiding. And yet I was still there. I remember when I decided I was definitely going to give up. Definitely, I had to. I remember thinking, okay, there's 2 more nights to go. I'll have a few beers tonight, and I'd be thinking after about the 5th or 6th one, everything around me still here. I'm still here. I haven't moved from this spot. I've just drunk 5 or 6 beers while listening to music or watching football on TV or something. And I was this illusion that I was soothed by it or was feeling better was an illusion. It was just that, because nothing had changed. I was still me. If someone could stand next to me, they'd say, "You're still here."
Sure.
And so are all your circumstances. They're still lurking and waiting for you in the morning.
Sure.
So you're saying
okay, guys, come on, say something.
Well, what I was going to say, you bring up that point in your book. This is Life Goes On by Alex Kahney. Wonderful read. 5-star review over here.
Thank you.
And you make a point in that book about how you went to the Emirates Stadium with me and a few other people. I think Kyle was there, and we all got drunk, but you stayed sober. And you say how you didn't really notice us becoming more animated or more interesting. We just had the same sort of night, whether or not we were sober or drunk. But you might have woken up with less of a hangover.
That was really that's in the book. It's obviously, it's not the main thing in the book. It's one of the asides.
That's not what it's all about. No.
No, it's not. But it's true. But that was part of what informed me. That was one of my realizations.
Okay, so it's interesting. So what you're saying is that, in a way, although you weren't drinking and they were, you would say your perception of them was that they were still the same people. But even though surely their behaviour must have been slightly different after they were drunk, but objectively, if you look at people getting drunk versus being sober, there is a difference, isn't there? Would you not say? I'm just curious what you think about that or what that really meant.
No, my point was we were all the same. They weren't drinking heavily. It wasn't an all-day session. It was they were drinking beer throughout the evening, I think.
We had a few pints before the game, probably. And then had
you mean you didn't drink enough for just so therefore the difference was very minuscule. So what you were saying really is that it wasn't that big a deal. So therefore, why do it at all? It's kind of the point.
To be fair, if I supported Arsenal, I'd drink every night as well.
I think you need to now.
Yeah, most Arsenal supporters need a lot of alcohol.
Right, well.
I think what's interesting is maybe the line at which you cross when alcohol doesn't make things more stimulated anymore. You're just kind of drinking out of routine.
Yeah, sure. And any other time, I would have been. I would have not only have joined them. I'm sure I would have drunk more, and I'm sure I would have drunk all the way home as well on the train. A few cans on the train, and then probably get a can out the fridge when I got home, and then fall asleep at midnight drunk. So,
and desperately needing a piss during the night.
Well, this is another thing that I often couldn't do so many things in the evenings, because the evenings were, if it involved a train journey or traveling, I didn't want to go, because I needed to be near home. Yeah. I was so limited in what I could do. I used to watch movies, and in the movie, if there's a scene set in an evening where they're talking or discussing the plot, or something's happening in the movie, I remember thinking, I can't do this. I wouldn't be able to be sober and normal and operate normally in the evening, because I would always have to be drunk all the time. So I robbed myself of some of. It's kind of half your life, really. Or in fact, if you consider your non-work life, if you work during the day like most people 5 days a week, and you're drinking every night, you're robbing yourself of all your free time. Nearly all of it.
I'm guilty of this as well. I'm guilty because throughout my life, I'm 52 years old. I've been an Olympic drinker, a gold standard drinker, but I kind of can moderate it now. I can quite happily have two pints, and that would do me. But if I'm out, it's 8 to 10 plus.
Yeah, and I guess for me it's it depends on my mood. So I can see everything you're saying. I agree with, because I can see how much it can be a trap and how it, to the extent to which it can be an escape from reality, because I've experienced that many times. And the weirdest part is sometimes when you want to get drunk to be on the same level as other people or to just feel something a certain way, and then ironically, although you enjoyed it at the time, later on you feel like crap because your body's so weighed down by all the toxins of the alcohol. So it's I've experienced that.
Sure.
Right.
I think like the motivation to drink, I think when you're young tends to be like a sense of adventure, and it seems really exciting, you know.
Yeah.
But you get to a certain point where that maybe wears off, and you know, it becomes monotonous. You end up going to the pub.
It's like you're quite moderate now, aren't you? When you always be moderate, really, haven't you? You don't really like.
To me?
Yeah. Would you say, or you're being honest?
Ask Alex.
Well, okay. Alex with his alcohol intake generally.
We've had some good sessions, mate. You know, it ebbs and flows. You know, sometimes I probably drink to excess, and then other times I can wind that down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose it gets to a point where you got to decide whether or not it's stimulating you anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And if it's not, then yeah, you are just doing it because the government say you can.
Since the beginning of mankind, man has been experimenting and dabbling in various hallucinogens and alcohol and whatever to get a high or to a different level.
Again, caffeine.
To break the norm from their kind of mindset. And I think kind of it does actually facilitate that role. I think, you know, personally speaking, I don't think I could actually completely give up alcohol because I do actually, sometimes I like coming in and cracking open a cold beer and going, yeah, that's great. I don't necessarily want to have 12 pints. Sometimes it turns out that way because Alex, I get with you because, you know, through lockdown, where I thought, oh, the pubs won't be open, it just kind of reversed. I was just sitting in parks with bottles of wine, reading a book, being all intellectual and all that. But that bottle of wine, I think, I can't carry on drinking wine. I'll just get myself 6 cans to go home with. And
well, you know, I was always a pleasure drinker. I like good wine, and I like, you know, not expensive, but good wine. You can get really good wines that are cheap. And I like really good beers.
Yeah.
So, you know, I like real ale and, you know, craft beers. I've never drunk spirits. I've never drunk any of the sort of like wretched stuff that, you know, I've always been a pleasure-seeking drinker, right? I've loved the pub for its atmosphere. I could gladly go either with friends or even on my own. I could watch a game of football with a really good beer and think this is great. I could read a book. You can't read a book very long when you're drinking because you start thinking, you know, elsewhere.
You'll get it wet, you know.
But it can't.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. I mean, so that kind of leads me to another question because you have a lot of friends who still drink. How hard was it to still continue doing what you wanted to do socially when everyone around you hadn't changed? They were all still drinking the same amount.
Well, for example, I went to Belgium with some friends, and they were getting really hammered every night. and then everyone we met would be in a pub, and they were getting hammered, and I wasn't. I had a whale of a time. It was great. It backed up what my resolution had been, which was nothing's changed. I'm still here. Nothing's changed. So I'm probably more likely to remember it better, if anything.
So what you're saying was it wasn't that hard for you to continue doing what you wanted to do.
No, and it was an abrupt decision. It was done. Right, today it starts. Stuck with it. It's been a year. Almost.
And how was that first few days?
I already knew what to expect, and I'd planned it, and so I just did it. It was easy. That's something else I wanted to talk about. It was actually totally easy. It didn't take any effort. It was like when I used to smoke cigarettes, you know, when I was a teenager at school, and I played football. I played for my university, and I decided that I'm going to give up smoking. I had been a typical schoolboy smoker, you know, 5 or 10 a day, you know, steal a cigarette out your mum's purse and stuff like that. And I decided I was not going to smoke, and I stopped, and I never smoked again. I just stopped. One thing you can do is convince yourself that you don't like it, and you don't, and that's enough.
Well, that's interesting. So how would you ascribe that motivation? Because sometimes people always want to stop, and they know they're not they're not gaining from it. I imagine you tried to quit booze at different points in your life, maybe, but this time you found it really easy.
Well, I'd stopped. I think there's the answer. I'd stopped for different reasons. I'd stopped because I didn't have any money, or I'd stopped because I thought I'd lose weight, or it'd be healthy for me. And the reasons weren't the same reason, which was I decided it was unnecessary, and it was preventing me from doing just better things with my time. So, and I just decided and it wasn't it wasn't doing me any good whatsoever. It wasn't improving my life. I realized that what good it had, I thought it was giving me, was an illusion. This is my preamble at the start of this. The fine feeling that my worries have gone away and I can forget my boss and all the people I fucking hate, and they were still there, and I realized it was just an illusion. I might as well have just gone to bed early and had slept and hoped for a nice dream. So I viewed it differently, same as I viewed smoking as.
Well, you could see the wood from the trees, and you could visualize the immense benefits of stopping being so much more worthwhile than just getting a bit drunk every now and then.
Yeah, and of course, I go to the supermarket and I look at the beers there. I think, oh, that looks nice. I'd love to have one, maybe. I don't dislike it by any means. That's not at all what I'm saying. I love beer. You and me, we go for real ales all the time. We go far and wide to find good ones, and we'd spend, like £8 a can sometimes on a really good one.
A really good quality beer. Yeah.
Now when you get alcohol free, right? If you can get that beer alcohol free, you'll do it still, but otherwise you wouldn't, obviously, right now.
So maybe that was the realization that it was what I thought it was the good part. What I thought was good about it outweighed what I realized wasn't good about it.
So do you think it could be that taste to an extent? Because I think you were saying you like the taste of good beer. So do you find with some of the alcohol-free ones that the taste is just as good, and that's good enough for you? You don't.
I found that out by accident afterwards, because I had no intention of switching to low alcohol beer. I just thought no beer whatsoever. I was content to have a cup of coffee or something.
Yeah.
And then I went to, what's it called, the German Signs, yes.
Yeah.
In
Richmond?
The one in Kingston. There's one in Richmond, there's one in Kingston. I was the one in I was thinking the one in
I've got it.
in Kingston, and someone said, why don't you try one of their alcohol-free beers? I thought, what's the point? And I had one. It was great. It's really good
as well.
Yeah, and I'm drinking alcohol-free beer. It is a good placebo if you were considering to give up drinking and wanted a placebo. It's great.
It probably has a positive association. Just the flavour.
Maybe that's what it is. I really don't know. I found out by accident that they taste good. Generally, they taste very similar to beer.
Yeah, I wish I could have them. Obviously, I've got a gluten intolerance. The annoying thing is, it's really hard to find an alcohol-free beer is also gluten-free. They do exist, but it's so rare.
Yeah, it's usually one or the other. Yeah.
Luckily, I'm one of those people who can. I can drink in moderation. I don't feel need to completely quit that. I suppose everyone's different. This is what's really interesting about it. This is why it's good, because it's like, I think Laurie Wright talks this kind of stuff a lot about how he overcame his addiction, obviously, and I guess this is kind of what you're talking about as well, Alex. It's interesting the way it all relates to how we perceive reality.
The thing is with alcohol, it kind of stops all your inhibitions. They'll kind of go out the window, and there's a point where obviously it goes a bit too far, and you go too far in the opposite direction. But it is kind of a good icebreaker, I find, in many a situation.
It can be great to make friends. Like a lot of people I know, even till this day, I met at the pub.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. In moderation, that's just one thing, but it shouldn't ever be the only focus. And that's kind of what I was saying, and that's kind of it's interesting.
Well, I think that's the appeal of the pub is the community spirit that comes with it.
Alex,
it's not just the alcohol; it's the getting together.
The whole procrastination of when you're drinking, you're not getting things done which you could do. I used to have that terribly with weed. I'd get in with an itinerary of things that I was going to do, and I maybe even touch one or two of those sort of things. in a half-assed, stoned way. And I do have that with alcohol. On many occasions, like a few years ago on my dad's birthday, it happened to fall on the same day as the Kingston Beer Festival, which is at the Working Men's Club.
That's unfortunate.
and traditionally, all my friends would go there, and we, tried different ales. And I was flying in because we were going out for a family meal. There was 15 of us around the table in a restaurant in the evening.
Yeah. Mm.
And I thought I'd go in there and have a couple of ales and try a few different ones on offer. There's hundreds of them, and I went in there and I started off. I thought I'll have that. I'm only going to have 2 or 3, so I'll start with the 6%ers, right?
Yeah, start strong.
5 hours later, I rock up at my dad's birthday. I sat down next to my sister-in-law, and she just whispered to me, "God, you started early." And I was like, "Do I look bad?" She goes, "You look terrible." And I was trying to style it out for the rest of the thing, getting dirty looks off everyone.
When was it?
The thing is that if you try to not look drunk, you end up looking drunker.
Yeah, but if it's kind of there is you've got to know your limitations, and this is If I know I've got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to drink 10 pints till 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
because I could drink until 7 o'clock at night and get away with it. But
what's funny is going to work at a pub, absolutely hanging out of your arsehole, and just and all you're looking at all day is beer, and that's what done it to you. When you're working behind the bar, you got to be all sort of energetic and stuff, but inside you're spinning.
From time to time, I do question the validity of alcohol in my life, because I'm Alex. I love you. Sometimes I turn around and think, what is the point of it? Why am I doing it? Why couldn't I just had, even on, like, I'm obviously still drinking, but even on nights when I think, why did you have to have 10 pints? Why couldn't you cut it off at 8 or 6? Or 2 or 3. And for a large part of my life, I didn't see the point of drinking alcohol unless I was going to get pissed. People used to say to me, "Oh, do you pop in the pub for a couple of pints?" And I'd be like, "What's the point in a couple of pints?" And they might have 2, and I'll drink 4 in that time. Bang, bang.
Yeah.
You're an ale drinker. You can chuck them down.
Yeah, that's it. They're not as busy.
But I've actually recently, and this has a lot to do with, I've got a inguinal hernia in my groin. So when I need to go to the toilet, I need to go to the toilet. So I haven't been drinking the volumes I have, but that's just been out of necessity, I think.
Maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But that again sort of speaks to the, like the necessity giving you the real incentive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy when people are addicts on some level, whether you're addicted a little bit or a lot, it's easy to always kind of get around properly giving up.
I can relate to the whole, if I'm going to share anything, I'll say I can relate to the whole element of escapism where you do something in order to not feel the reality you're in, which is kind of what Alex was saying originally, and that's always been a thing. It's good to be able to escape reality at certain times, but I think it has to be in a way that's controlled as well. It can't be completely chaotic all the time. Once in a while, but just, I don't know, it's like, it'd be boring to do nothing as well, though, wouldn't it? Just to be totally sober all the time. Or to say you're sober and then just drink coffee and be like, "Oh, I'm sober." Like, caffeine is another one. I don't understand that. What do you guys think about caffeine? So really, I always think about that. Why is caffeine not a big deal when it clearly is a big deal?
Because I think kind of Alex touched on this earlier, but because it's not very stimulating. Like, it doesn't really change your the way you're behaving. It just gives you the stimulation.
Makes you hot.
On top of being very addictive, so it's easy for the government to kind of have that in society.
Yeah, it makes you very high, and especially when you go out with sugar, even more high.
So caffeine?
It's great when you crawl out of a nightclub at 5 in the morning and you've got to go straight to work and you sit there and have 4 espressos.
Yeah, it serves a purpose. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, it's good.
That's what I mean. It's like I guess the point is that we often end up in a situation in society where people are just getting off their tits and then using coffee, like you're saying, to basically, to counteract it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how our society operates, isn't it? People get wasted the weekend and they drink this coffee and then water or coconut water to replenish their supplies, back to work again. It's just another method of escapism from what you don't want to see.
What, caffeine?
No, alcohol, all of it, drugs.
Oh, right.
All drugs.
Yeah. I mean,
caffeine is big.
See,
caffeine.
Alex's point earlier, or question earlier, why over the kind of the Yuletide period do we all jump on this getting drunk
That's
thing?
very relevant, yeah.
I think that actually kind of applies to any sort of holiday periods, because the British people, part of them going on holiday is to get out there and, drink loads. And I think it's about the pressures of society and working, and also it's kind of built into our culture that we're British and we drink pints and
which is,
and I think whenever we get that free time, it's like, okay, you don't have to worry about work anymore. The first thing most people will reach to is a bottle of wine or a can of beer or a pint of ale.
It's a simple pleasure, isn't it? That anyone over 18 can.
Because I think most people believe that you get happiness and fun from alcohol. Without that, and that's kind of how.
To be fair, I won't deny it's helped with happiness and fun many times. Think about girls here, but when
it serves a purpose.
With someone you like and you get drunk again, and then you shag over it. It is great fun, I must say. Without being funny, that is great fun.
Well, yeah, I could tell you some other stories.
Yeah, exactly.
On another podcast.
Yeah. But no, you shouldn't rely on that. It's true. It's true. And I think one thing I'd like to share is interesting how when I've it's that kind of thing, meeting girls and stuff, the times when it's been the most fulfilling have been the times when it hasn't been so reliant on that. When I may have had a little bit, but when it wasn't very much, when it was more about talking to the person, about understanding, about connecting with them, but not just the haze of everything around you being like, this is what it matters. This person could be anything. It's like, yeah, it's just other things. I met someone once, had someone over to mine, had sex, it was good. She went home afterwards, it was all good though. But I was thinking would I have had much fun with her specifically if I hadn't been drunk? Maybe not. Maybe it was the alcohol made it all seem.
I think it's like what Nick said earlier about alcohol just like getting rid of inhibitions. That can be so liberating and free that and just enjoyable. I think that's why a lot of young people like drinking, isn't it? Just to feel free.
The mask topic we talked about.
Yes.
Yeah. Because a lot of people wear masks they have to wear for work and through all different kind of aspects of their life, but sometimes when they drink alcohol they can take that mask off, and sometimes they turn into monsters. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sometimes they're hilarious. Other times they're crying their eyes out or whatever.
Sometimes they're violent.
But
there's a wide spectrum of reaction. Yeah.
Angry drunk, romantic drunk.
So Alex.
Yes.
Alex, do you think that the part of the British culture is steeped in drinking, and it's kind of we've been fed that narrative, and it's kind of acceptable for the British to be the sort of ale drinker sort of nation? Because we as an ale drinker, it's kind of a British thing. It's not really a European thing or anywhere.
Well, that's just one kind of alcohol.
Anywhere else in the world, and I think it's kind of. That's what I like about it. I'm not a lager, never really been a lager man.
Yeah, you're more cultured. Just not being funny, lager tends to be associated with the other kind of British culture, doesn't it? That's the other side, the lager louts and all that, as people say. Stereotypes, but still.
But drinking is kind of built into...
Well, you're thinking about beer, though, specifically, and cider. Beer and cider? Cider
if we talk
anything.
Well, yeah, not everything. There is difference, but yeah.
If we're talking about binge drinking or nightly binge drinking, because we are unhappy in our lives, or we feel frustrated, or our jobs overwhelming us, and we feel like we don't have any money to go anywhere or do anything. And if we're big drinkers because of that, maybe we have a worse problem with that. Whereas in Europe, where they drink all right, they drink starting from the morning in Europe nicely. Maybe if your life, maybe if there's less pressure at work, people are nicer to you at work. You live in very peaceful surroundings. It's beautiful weather, and there's a culture, a lot of culture everywhere, and there's also an awful lot less visible dissimilarity in people's incomes and their what they can acquire with their life. If people are generally happier, maybe, and if they do drink in a more, say, I don't like the word responsible. It's nothing to do with responsible, but if they drink less, or in a less binge-like way, maybe that reflects that their lives are better. And doesn't that bring me back to what we said in the first place, that I used to drink to bury my problems, and so therefore, if people have less problems, maybe they, in general, population wide, there'll be less drinking.
Yeah,
and
I think that's very poignant.
And then isn't that a reflection on Britain? And if we drink more in a more destructive way,
Yeah.
and it's not only getting drunk and messing up. It's every fucking car crash, every fight at home. You fight your wife or your husband.
Yeah.
You fight your brothers. You fight people in the street. We were out last night. People were sort of intimidating people. This is in Kew. You never see that in Kew.
Really?
Clutching onto little crates of beer in their hands.
Sorry,
Yeah, so people are drunk and they're looking for a fight.
Well, so
It's just more likely, more likely to find fights where there are people drinking.
So you and Natasha, your wife, were out sober basically because you're both sober, and then like you were watching these people and you noticed they were just really drunk and just causing trouble basically, as people do. That's basically.
Yeah, but if they hadn't been drinking, they surely wouldn't. They might still have the same aggressiveness, but they wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't express it. No.
Well,
it's
cocaine. So another one that causes.
All right. Well, something to.
But then you could ask the question: then why, if drunk people cause such public nuisance, why the government are all right with alcohol being legal and not marijuana,
which is peaceful.
Revenue, tax.
Yeah, of course.
They make loads.
But they could tax marijuana as well if that were legal.
Marijuana could be legalized in the exact same way, and they could make lots of money from taxes. It would be huge, but people wouldn't be causing public nuisance.
Some of it is just like, obviously Canada, I think Canada's trying to legalise it. Holland is,
Canada's legalised it
Netherlands is apparently not fully legal, but it's like tolerated to a very large degree. It's legal in some places. And then California...
Oh, okay, all right.
Certain states of the US, California, I think, I don't quote me, I'm just saying I think it's...
Colorado, Washington.
Oh, okay, okay.
Maybe a couple more. Yeah,
it's a shame you can't get Natasha on, Alex, so she could probably give us some feedback about how that is in the US with weed and alcohol and how they see it there. It'd be quite interesting. Maybe another time.
She wants to join the podcast in the future, but not tonight.
Oh, cool. No, it'd be good. Very interesting to hear about that. How it's her experience from the US, because obviously quite different there. I don't even know how they see alcohol in the USA, but I'm sure it's different than how we see it. I don't know, just like.
Well, Alex lived in America.
I lived in San Francisco. I don't know how representative that is of everywhere else. I think there's one, you don't drink in public in California. The first time I went to a pub in California, I went and stood out. I got my pint and went and stood outside. My brother grabbed me and said, "What are you doing? You can get arrested for that. You can be be incarcerated for drinking in public."
Oh, so really? You're not actually allowed to legally?
No, good Lord, no. You're not allowed to drink in public. You can drink in a bar and that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, not outdoors. Not outdoors. Oh, that's interesting.
No, there's no outdoor drinking. America's has a long history since Prohibition. America's got a long love-hate relationship with alcohol, I think.
I'm sure it has.
The average American is probably quite similar to the four of us in that they like drinking and they have a lot of need or use for drinking and enjoyment. There's a big micro beer culture there, real ale, whatever they would call it in the States. Good wine. There's California wine's world famous. So there is a definite kind of enjoyment of alcohol. There's less display of drunkenness in public. That's only because it's illegal. I don't know whether that would uphold if it were legalized.
How about marijuana? How they see it there in Cali? From what you remember?
Probably same, people rolling up at home and stuff. Probably same. I would say very equal, I mean, what kind of people do I mix with in any walk of life? Tend to be sort of like-minded, similar kind of people. I go to a lot of bars and pubs and meet people who just like us, just like we are. Wherever I go, I have no connection whatsoever with underworld or any of the criminals and people I wouldn't ever get to go anywhere near.
No, of course.
But normal people are like pretty much the same.
Well, that's I thought always the irony of marijuana is that because it's criminalized, it encourages gangs and huge cartels to cultivate it and sell it on. When really it's quite a peaceful drug.
Yeah, that's right. It is. People don't tend to start fights on marijuana. Like from my experience, I've seen don't want to go into massive detail about it, but I know that from what I've experienced and seen, it's more like, people might get really high and then down the line get paranoia, or maybe on the same night, but usually it's more like down the line, whereas like with alcohol, it's like you can drink and then immediately change your personality in a negative way, more generally from what I've experienced, And like, certainly for me personally, the only time I ever like tried to start a fight was when I had a lot to drink. There you go.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, marijuana tends to make people eat their body weight in crisps and watch cartoons. and then pass out with crumbs all over their clothes. Yeah,
and listen to the Beatles on.
Yes, that as well.
I'm really, very passive person, but all the stupid arguments and things that shouldn't have gone anywhere, shouting matches and and screaming at people and all related to alcohol, all of them, all my life, any scrape I've ever had.
Yeah.
Things that never would have happened had I not been drinking. I mean, I've never been a wife beater or anything really bad. I've never had a fist fight or anything. But yeah, so I think you become so embroiled in yourself, and you just can't see other people's points of view.
Sure.
So you just argue. You argue your point, and you're uncontrolled. This is.
Well, there's two sides to the coin.
I might only have an argument once a year, but
sometimes alcohol can help people forget about the petty things. Like it can go either way. What do you say? Like if you had a problem with a friend and then you met them at the pub and you'd had a few, you might be like, fuck it, give them a hug, and then
you'd probably do that anyway, wouldn't you? I don't think alcohol.
No, I'm just suggesting that. Like the reaction, it can go either way. There's two extremes,
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about anyone can have a couple of beers and be unaltered, or a few beers.
Yeah.
I'm talking about when you get drunk. You towards the end of an evening of drinking and you're drunk. You could certainly say. I used to tell lies. I used to start exaggerating about how good I was at this and that and the other. And I'd feel awful in the morning at how embarrassing it all must have been.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think you focus on yourself, and then you, on the one hand, on the other, you're inspired to let everyone know what you think about yourself. I would summarize alcohol, the alcohol experience, as something like that. Something I was going to say 5 minutes ago, we moved on to quick was, I don't think, like, say a city centre that's on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and there's all the bars are spilling out, or they're even still open, and there are clubs and everything going on. It's not anarchy. The police might pick up a few people, or there might be a few fist fights break out, but it's not all out anarchy. I doubt whether many people get killed. They might in some places, but it's not. It's really people being unruly and letting their hair down, and there are fights. Every A&E department has people coming in with cuts and bruises, often self-inflicted or from falling out of a window or whatever. So, in answer to the question is, why is it allowed? It doesn't. The toll, the danger toll, isn't great enough to ban it.
But people don't realise the sociological impact of
Sure.
what you're saying, I think. And I would say that's what my view on it is, that because for simple reason, a good example, I won't name any names, but I know people and I've met people, right, who are completely really nice people when they're sober, or at least certain people who are like basically completely sound when they're sober, most of the time, let's say, like almost all the time. Yeah? And then they'll have a drink or two, and once it gets to the third or fourth, their personality will change radically. They'll become aggressive, hostile, bolshy, and just rude. And then the next day, they're back perfectly normal again because they're sober. I really do notice the difference now. Because I don't drink that much these days. So when I do, or even when I don't usually drink after I get drunk, and I notice when people do drink, even after like 3 or sometimes they can change their personality radically. They only get some more, like 4 or 5. It's really interesting. It's a really deeper sociological thing, and I think society doesn't care about enough.
As Clint Eastwood said in Magnum Force, a man's got to know his limitations.
Make my J punk.
That is essentially it. A lot of people drink beyond their capabilities.
Yeah,
I did myself, but I got to a point when I always wanted to make sure I got home okay. It might have been a wobbly stroll, and there might have been a few hedges that I brushed past, but You know, there was times when I wake up in people's front gardens, you know, and it's knees
and so many people have had those kind of experiences, right? You know, there's another one, like, it's not really, it's just a fictional example, but like in, what is it, Indiana Jones, the first one, he's like, he thinks the girl he was basically in love with for a while, he thinks she's been killed by the Nazis, like blown up in their truck, basically. And then he cuts to him, he's in a bar, he's drinking whiskey, right? And it's not clear how much he's drunk, but it's interesting how that's one of the few times he like tries to do something quite foolish. He tries to kill the guy who he thinks started it. He's like the guy he's fighting. He's just the villain, basically. All over a conversation. And it's probably not related to the alcohol, but it's just interesting how, like, you know, hard spirits or like certain alcohols, they're almost associated with it. You know, if you drink them and you're on a downer, if you're drinking to overcome pain or anger or whatever, it will inevitably come bubbling back up. And if that's even shown in subtle ways through media, it's just an interesting point.
I think, like, to go back to why it's allowed, I think why alcohol is okay for the government to permit.
And media, you're saying,
is because, as Alex says, it doesn't create such danger like anarchy, but it also doesn't sort of promote a lot of organisation or intellectual thought.
That's right, it's disorganised chaos.
So it kind of keeps the masses on quite a nice little...
Because that's it. It's disorganised
level.
Because it's like, if people get wasted in a group, you're right. They're not going to go and, you know, together go
start a revolution
or do something really destructive, because they're not organised enough. They're too fucked. But they'll still be. The chaos they cause is too low a level for the government to justify banning it or whatever. Not they should ban it either, obviously. But it's just
no. And I wouldn't.
There's a whole industry that supports the alcohol trade.
Well, of course there is.
Yeah, it's massive industry, isn't it? And what would we do with all the weed?
And the other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I mean,
so Alex, when you stopped, since you've stopped, have you ever had a point where you thought, oh God, you know, I could really do with a beer now?
No, I mean, as I said, if I'm in the supermarket and I walk past the beer section, I think, oh, that looks nice. You know, I'm sure I don't. The idea of having a headache tomorrow or feeling just rough puts me off. It really puts me off. I'm fine with that. I'd rather read a book. I like going to bed. What happens is, within a couple of weeks, and I've given up in the past for different reasons. You know, it never lasted very long, up to a year sometimes, or just a few months maybe. But you know, giving up for different reasons to this present reason. I've done it before, and always what happens is, you get a proper sleeping pattern, which you don't get with alcohol. Yeah. I fall asleep at midnight and I sleep through till my alarm goes off in the morning, and I'm fully refreshed and I'm fine. So you do re-establish real sleep. So I quite look forward to watching football and then reading a book, watching a movie or something, and doing something I can enjoy and appreciate being sober in the evenings, and going to bed and just falling asleep and having nice pleasant dreams. So I don't miss it one bit.
One thing I will say about drinking, which is true, is and you mentioned earlier, is like my Netflix continue watching is massive. There's so many films I've just fallen asleep.
I've got tons done this year. I've got 2 books published. I've made a music video, or maybe 2.
I saw the video, loved it. Yeah.
Thank you.
He watched Children of the Revolution.
I've achieved loads of stuff that in the past I would have thought I was getting on with, and I hadn't. You know, I convinced myself I was doing something.
Procrastination, isn't it?
Well, it's not that. It's just you think you're doing it, and I don't really have time tonight, but I'm working on it. You think, and it never gets completed. So that's on the plus side. I've done lots. I've done a lot. I could have done even more, really, because I've been out of work for periods and stuff. So I could have done even more if I set my mind to it. But it does certainly give you much more time to do more useful things. It gives you all your nights back, basically.
I've got to say, I'm impressed and also very glad that you found it such an easy transition.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people who have drunk a lot and then give up, there'll be certain reflexes, like to say, even something going really well, like, I don't know, a promotion at work, their initial reaction would be, oh, let's get a beer, like to celebrate.
Yeah.
Or, so they'll have their reflexes, and in the same way, if something goes wrong, like you lose your job, I better have a beer and like forget about it. So I think the fact that you're not having any real impulses to drink again is a positive thing, man.
I'm not.
Go on, Nick.
I was just going to say, I'm not too keen on the other options out there. Like, there's only so much fruit juice you can drink, and fizzy drinks you can drink, sparkling water. The three drinks I love most in life are tea, water, and ale. And, I'm not interested. Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm not here to convert anyone. I'm only saying what happened to me. I'm not here to convert anyone. I don't have a bad thing to say about alcohol or pubs. I've had great, all my great adventures have been fueled by drinking. So, and I love pubs and stuff. I mean, this year I've lost my job 2 or 3 times. I've had a few good breaks, some lucky stuff has happened. Some, real causes for celebration, and these would all of them would have been straight to the pub in the past, straight to the pub.
Yeah.
And they were I enjoyed the good bits and got pissed off with the bad bits, but I didn't go to the pub. I didn't need to.
I'm so interested in this transition because it's something, like I said, I'm kind of toying with it myself at the moment. I know, yeah, but I am. Sometimes I think, and I'm not drinking as much as I was as well. So I'm not actually waking up with really bad hangovers. I might, if I have a couple of bottles of wine, I will do, but I'm not really drinking to that extent where 3 years ago I was really, I'd finish work and I'd go straight to the pub after work. And I'd leave the pub at closing time, and then I'll be making myself a pissed up fry up at 12:30 at night.
Well, listen, I'm probably got the gene. My dad was an alcoholic. His dad was an alcoholic. My dad drank and smoked himself to an early grave, and so did his dad, and so did probably everyone else in my family. So I was kind of lucky in that I probably had the gene where I've never had really bad hangovers. I'd never be in bed all day feeling ill or anything. I could always get up, even after a real skinful. Again, I've never drunk spirits. I know they're much worse.
Yeah.
So I've always only been beer and wine, but I could drink a skinful and get up at 7 and go to work and be fine. My breath would probably be terrible. My eyes would probably be very red, but I've never suffered from that. One thing that if you need an incentive, I calculated that Natasha, my wife, she and I would drink, every night, let's face it, and I'd probably go to the pub after work, then we get some beers and we'd drink at home. Typical night would be something like that. And I calculated that pubs are expensive. I calculated that between us, we'd probably shift 30 to 50 pounds a day, and think about it, that's 6 pints is 30 quid.
Yeah.
3 pints each in an hour, 2 hours, that's easy. And then more beer afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
So I calculated, even on 30 quid a day, and we never had a day off. It was every day, or every night, rather, but I've never been a daytime drinker. Even at 30 quid a day is 1,000 a month.
Yeah.
There's no days off.
I did a similar figure.
That's £12,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money, yeah.
I was once asked in a pub, I'd actually come out without my wallet, and I said to the landlord of the pub, look, can you give me a few beers and I'll pop the money in tomorrow. I've left my wallet at home, haven't got my card or anything on me. And he said, oh no, don't do tabs. I said, I come in here every day and I spend at least £20. If you take it, I'm spending £20 a day. That's £140 a week. That's £560 a month. Can you give me a tab? And he gave me a tab.
Yeah.
Right.
And it just made me spend even more, that's all.
And how big was your tab the next day, Nick?
That £20 was me being minimal with my figures, because I quite often buying other people drinks and that, and I'd be in there for a good few hours, especially if it was a music pub, and I might do 40, 50 quid a night on the jacks, Well,
that's another thing about being drunk. You become a lot more loose with your wallet, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you want a pizza afterwards, and then you...
Yeah, well, it's another 15 quid or something. It's crazy. Yeah.
See, what happened with me is in the 90s, I started working in post-production in television, and pretty much everyone in that industry would thrived on mainly alcohol, but there was obviously a load of narcotics involved as well. All the engineers would be sitting in the pub at the end of the road waiting for an emergency call out, and every opportunity, every night after work. Oh, it's rush hour. I'm not going to go home in rush hour to Kingston upon Thames from Soho. Let's go and have a few beers and wait for the rush hour to end. And before you know it, again, it's 11 o'clock at night. And so, so kind of my tolerance level went up massively. And I could drink for England.
So another question for you, Alex. We were talking about the whole general thing, but one of the questions I wanted to ask was specifically, I've written down here. So you were talking about the whole aspect of how society will promote, drinking, and I would argue also caffeine and other things that are legal high, so to speak, but it will suppress all the other more mind-altering substances, perhaps because they're more mind-altering. But what is your thoughts on that whole thing? Why and how and the whole thing? What do you think about all that? Summary of that.
Why alcohol and not other drugs to make us forget our woes? Well, alcohol's perfect because you drink it and it makes you forget rapidly and it distracts you, and then you fall asleep and your liver's just the right organ to fix it so that you're able to go to work in the morning. Now, I read somewhere that back in the day, in the 18th century, 19th century, the beginning of the modern era, when law and order and jobs and and the work ethic and everything took over from like a feudal or more sort of pre-industrial idea, the idea of the modern world where we all work, they decided, the powers that be decided, are we going to give the people to forget that they're slaves, really, alcohol, or are we going to give them opioids, or opiates rather, opium, things derived from opium? And they thought, no, alcohol's better because they can wake up ready to go back to work, whereas opium is more dreamlike, and we don't know whether we'll be able to control them for long on that. So opium, which was freely available 100 years ago or more, was banned, and since then every other drug that's against that doesn't fit that, you can drink to forget your worries as long as you're ready for work in the morning. Every other drug that doesn't do that doesn't allow that, is dangerous to this paradigm. So something like marijuana, if it makes you feel good and nice and you don't want to compete and you're mellow and you just want to listen to music, man, and you don't want to get up and go to work and you don't want to be materialistic, that one doesn't work. You want something that makes you kind of aggressive and sort of fight other people. I want his job, and my kid's going to go to that school, and and be aggressive
and spend your money, right.
Yeah,
so,
I would say from that logic they would justify legalizing cocaine because that makes people aggressive. They don't allow that either. But it's an interesting point.
Well, and then what about the drugs such as LSD, which might open your mind and see everything differently, and they go on for hours. You might wake up in the morning and take another one, and you'll never go back to work. Or what about, pick a drug and see what it does.
Really.
Ones that are more likely to make you see that the materialistic world as bullshit, or want to drop out of it, or say this is not doing me any good.
I agree with you. I was just going to say that the interesting parallel again with alcohol and cocaine, as I've spoken about this to people, is that there's a similar effect for some people, and also the degree to which it's said that some people in the business world use cocaine habitually for the similar reasons, but obviously it's below board. They don't reveal it. But it's funny how that one's not legal, even though it has a similar effect. It also suppresses your empathy and doesn't make you more sort of introspective, makes you more aggressive and more domineering.
Well, are you talking about cocaine?
Yeah. I would say cocaine's more like alcohol than any of the other drugs. It's just
there are drugs that are pharmaceutical that aren't too dissimilar from cocaine. That are given, for example, like ADHD medication. There'll be stimulants that work off a similar compound, but it's called methylphenidate. But essentially, it's activating you, mentally so that you can concentrate better. I mean, people use coke for that reason as well in the past and today, probably still. But if you take Freud, Freud was a massive advocate of cocaine.
And cocaine is relatively short-lived high. Whereas things like ecstasy and LSD, you're out for like 12 hours, and you're not going to go to work properly, and if you do, you're likely to lose your job or fuck something up.
Sometimes the weed as well.
Whereas coke, you can have I worked in television, so many a time I'd be rolling into work, smashed out of brain, have a few lines of Charlie and a few espressos, and bang, I'll be up and running.
Scary, isn't it?
Not good life.
You're like a horse out the gates.
I'm out of that game.
I wonder with cocaine whether or not it's that's necessarily the effect that it would have generally on people, because we know that coke that's sold on the streets is heavily cut.
Yeah.
With all kinds of harmful stuff. If it was decriminalized and kind of used on some level medically, maybe, as prescriptions, perhaps for people who could benefit from it, and it was actually in pure form, you wouldn't get those negative
I'm not arguing that.
behaviorally.
By the way, I'm not arguing we should legalize cocaine. I'm just saying it's interesting how society.
I'm neither arguing it or denying it. I think it's because the fact that a drug's illegal doesn't make it safer.
Exactly. Yeah, this is my.
It's like, yeah,
I stand with
legal
you
or illegal. Yeah, it makes no difference. It's really obviously illegal means it's more likely it could have been tampered with, but really we don't know what. I mean, without being funny about it, I mean, it's, with alcohol, when you get cheap makes, sometimes you can kind of tell how chemically altered they are. Like, I don't mean to cast aspersions or anything, but to be honest, from my experience, cheap lager, you can tell off sometimes how chemically altered it is, how shit it is, compared to proper beer or like nice lagers, like Pilsner, you know what I mean? Proper beer, it's like, you can tell the difference in organic wine and cheap wine, for example.
Sure. Well, then you could argue that regulating drugs by making the government regulating them would make them better quality, and you'd actually end up maybe less people becoming addicts, coming in debt.
And this disconnect wouldn't be going on where you have people have all these different beliefs, and in the end, really it has to be what suits each person. And I mean, obviously, it's not natural for people to be screwed off of their minds or anything, but at the same time, what did early tribes do? They must have used certain substances of all kinds, including alcohol and things equivalent to marijuana, our acid, to stimulate their consciousness for spiritual reasons, or maybe even they had other reasons. We don't really know. It's all kind of mysterious, isn't it?
Sure.
Lawrence, you had another couple of points you wanted to make, which you messaged us about on the group chat, specifically for Alex. Do you remember what they were?
I brought them up already.
The power of motivation was one of them.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, we covered it earlier, but just the idea of, actually being able to quit something that you'd been habitually using for so long. The old saying, old habits die hard, like it's not as simple as you just turn off the switch, but the power of motivation is definitely real, because I think with cigarettes it's the hardest, because that it's messing up your chest, and that among being stinky and stuff, but it's very difficult to actually quit properly.
I don't have an issue with that, but I don't really smoke cigarettes very often, so I'm okay.
Nicotine is one of the most addictive substances, isn't it? So I think that's where people find the difficulty, is they don't have the motivation, but they're being told it's unhealthy.
I have done it in the past sometimes. Occasionally, if I had nothing else to do, like, like no alcohol, nothing else I could take, sometimes I would smoke cigarettes to sort of like reduce my stress levels. They wouldn't even do much. You just think it would. Maybe there's mild effect, but it's just like,
Sure. Well, I think essentially that it'll boil down to whether or not you really want to do it, and you're not stopping because you've been told it's a good idea or for some other arbitrary reasons.
Or stop doing it because you want to stop doing it, like Alex has done.
So I think Alex had a real motivation that inevitably made it a lot less difficult.
You have to change your view of it. You have to, and then it's easy.
Yeah.
Would you like to elaborate on that at all? Changing your view? We've got like 4 or 5 more minutes in there as well.
Sorry, I missed that. Say again.
We've got like 4 or 5 minutes. We have to wrap up. So, do you want to elaborate on that? What it means to like choose not to, basically, or to like let go?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I mean, take smoking. I used to smoke cigarettes, and then I thought these are disgusting. They're really bad for your lungs. They're counterproductive. If I was playing football in a team, and I thought I should. I really shouldn't be smoking as well as doing this. And I view them as giving you bad breath. They're fairly antisocial. They do. I just changed my perception. I hated them. I made myself hate them and think this is horrible. I really don't want to be a smoker. I really just detest smoking. And then I stopped. Then it was easy to stop. Stopping was logical.
So it's changing.
And the same with alcohol. I did it slightly differently, but I realized, I talked myself into realizing I didn't want to do it. And once I had done that, the actual carrying it out was logical. It became a logical thing to do. And I didn't.
So it became natural to stop, and not like a kind of unnatural change in your lifestyle.
Well, with that comes you don't miss it. You don't miss what it used to do to you, or you don't miss the good times it used to have and stuff. You don't. You replace. You realize that what you had been doing was counterintuitive, and that it had been robbing you of doing something better in that time. And then so you regret that you'd ever done it as much as you dislike doing it and don't want to do it anymore. So you just see it differently.
That's right. Yeah,
Really good.
I think that's a good point to have to sort of sum up with.
There was another thing as well, actually, Lawrence. You were going to talk a bit about Alex's book. I know you did mention it earlier, but specifically, you were going to just make. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about his book?
Well, I could just say that. And then I'll let Alex talk about it. It's his book, but I'll just say I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I just want to talk about your book.
I'm not ready for you, bro.
Do you want to talk about it?
It's a lot of commenting on media and the power of propaganda, and essentially it goes through different events that happened in the last 7 years, and it ends with COVID. I think Alex makes some really good points about how media are propagating an agenda.
Yeah.
So I'll let him talk about it a bit more.
Sure, yeah, go for it, Alex.
Oh, blimey.
Just a couple of minutes, we'll finish soon, but yeah, go for it.
I after 9/11, which happened when I was an impressionable, young man, I like everyone else, I was convinced that the Islamic people hated us and they wanted to kill us and they were among us and they were terrorists, and there were terrorists everywhere. And I'd be just as fearful as everybody else about getting onto a bus. I didn't want to fly. I really didn't want to fly. I was terrified of flying. And it took me 1 or 2 years to think, this is just bullshit. This is absolute bullshit. I'm being fed a load of bullshit about this, because you know people who are Muslim and whatever, and they're nothing like that. And also, nothing happened. There were no real dangers. They were all on TV. They were all in the newspaper. And I looked at the newspaper and realized that every single story in there was giving you the worst possible projection or the worst angle on everything. And a lot of it was all predictive or saying this is going to happen, this worst thing's going to happen. And I saw all these tricks that are used in the press. And then once I've seen that, and I realized it was all like that, then I started to ask myself why. And I became convinced, which I still am very convinced, that the idea is to keep people worried, to keep people down. Again, it comes back to making them just want to have a quiet life, leave me alone, I'll do my job, I don't hurt me. I want what's familiar and what I can really care about, which is my house and my family. And all this poison that was going into us, I said, I don't fucking need to know. If there are wars broken out in Mali or somewhere, why do I need to know? And then it would say, after fierce fighting, the rebels were pushed back and the army took over. There were 50,000 dead. And I thought, why the fuck are they telling me this? I don't need to know. I'm never going to go there. It means nothing to me. And then I equated it to everything, from the general election results to COVID and restrictions and everything else in the news. It's all irrelevant to me. It means nothing to me. And it was only there to make me scared. And I listened to every adult I'd heard was talking about it. All they could talk about was what's on the news. And most of it was verbatim. I thought, God, this is powerful. People are impregnated by this stuff. Yeah. And look at us. People are walking around with masks on. I have people who avoid me so greatly they would step into the road rather than come anywhere near me. Or if I walk anywhere, people stop, and they really look like footage, 1930s footage of Nazis. Nazis are very formal people. They sort of stand and back, and just wearing the mask and everything is so alienating. And it's within a space of a year, and it happened really fast. It only happened within less than a month. Everyone was altering their behaviour, and now suddenly everyone's working from home. Now everyone can't go to a football match. No one can go to the pub anymore.
Yeah.
And anyway, it started back then. It started with 9/11, and everything else since then. I found all the same. And to me, COVID is just the latest one. It's the latest scare.
What about people who know people who have had it, and when people like me?
I don't know anyone who has had it. People say, "What are you talking about? There's 30,000 dead. Don't you watch the news?" And I said, "Well, that's where it comes from. It only comes from TV."
Yeah, but Lawrence,
the statistics are certainly skewed. Yeah.
But equally, Lawrence, you know people who have had it. You will bet people who have had it.
Oh yeah, no, it's not a made-up virus. Yeah, my mum's a doctor, and she was there when when the intensive care exploded with COVID.
Right.
So no, it's not a made up virus. I think what Alex is getting at is that it's the way that the government used this virus to create a sensationalism regarding, oh, no one get together, everyone be afraid and stay at home. Which we could debate whether or not is the correct response to it, but the government have to commit to what they've said, because they're never going to turn around and say, oh, we were wrong about that.
Well, that's the problem. Even if the experts say they were wrong, they won't say it until we get a new government in, and then they can say this government was wrong. You know what I mean?
Fear is a great leveller.
But we won't see the government admitting it's wrong until the next government gets in and says, okay, actually the scientists said this, the government used the information wrongly. That's what I think they'll say, because obviously in some countries it's been handled differently, either more or less extreme. But the real issue I have with the way this country's handling it is not. So my view is, yes, of course the virus is real and it's dangerous. I just think the government's handling it really poorly. They're not actually dealing with it. If it is dangerous, they should be suppressing other things more. But they're just suppressing certain things by allowing closing pubs, by allowing schools to even. Half of it makes no sense. They're shown to be criminally incompetent, in my view.
Yeah, some of the rules are not logical.
Thank you for your very interesting opinions, gentlemen, and I really enjoyed the way we rounded that off. But do you have any more closing points on the general subject, which is to do with addiction and, of course, the way the
Yes, I do. I do. Merry Christmas, everybody, and don't drink too much.
Yes.
Merry Christmas, Alex.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Well,
thanks a lot, Alex. Always a pleasure, mate.
We're welcome to chat a little bit if you want. We're going to end the recording now, though. But thank you very much, everyone. You can, Alex, where can we find your book for viewers that are interested?
Same as every other book, on Amazon.
On Amazon. Well,
one more time.
And remind us, it's called Life Goes On, literally. Well,
Life Goes On, Alex Kahney.
Didn't you guys all promise to buy it 6 months ago, and now you've all forgotten about it?
Don't
it's here now. It's the point. Well, we'll check out Alex Kahney's new book on Amazon, Life Goes On, to hear a very interesting take on the way things are now in society and the media. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on addiction and alcohol, Alex, and for a very positive, uplifting end of the year with your story of how you overcame that. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks,
guys.
Bye.
Bye. And I'm recording. Bye-bye.
Adios.